Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County Forum for Candidates for Monroe School Board. I'm your moderator, Karen Matson, a member of the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County. And the candidates who are joining us for this forum are candidates for Monroe School Board. Brian Saulsman for District 1, Mary Reule, a candidate for School Board Representative in District 3, and Sarah Johnson for District 4. We invited, as always, all candidates for each of these positions. Candidates not participating are Jeremiah Campbell, candidate for District 1, Molly Barnes for District 3, Janine Burkhart, District 4, and Jennifer Bumpus, District 5. The League thanks all the candidates for running for office, for your willingness to serve the community if elected, and for taking the time to participate in this forum. It is the policy of the League to be nonpartisan. Therefore, we do not endorse candidates. We do not endorse or support or oppose parties. We take positions on issues which we have studied and on which we've reached consensus. Ground rules for this forum were sent to the candidates ahead of time. Let me take a moment to explain the question and answer period rules for our listeners. Opening and closing questions have been shared with the candidates. Other questions have not been shared. However, we've made each candidate aware of the issue areas this forum plans to cover, and we want to take a moment to thank all of the community members who sent us recommendations about local issues they'd like to hear about. I will pose the questions. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond. 90 seconds will be allowed for answers to the final question. I'll be sure to state any change in the amount of timing clearly, and you'll see the change on the timer. We're using a countdown timer, which is visible to all the candidates. It shows elapsed time. It alerts the candidates when there are 15 seconds left and when time is up. And the time limits on answers will be strictly enforced. So when the timer turns red and you hear the chime, you need to be finished talking. The order of the questions. I'll change the starting order for each question, rotating through the candidates in a systematic way to ensure a random and fair sequence. And the order that I determined randomly before the beginning of this forum were that Mr. Saulsman will lead off with the first question, then Ms. Reule, then Ms. Johnson. And then rotating through, Ms. Reule will lead off on the second one, and then Ms. Johnson will lead off on the third one. You'll figure out the pattern and fall right into it. So we are going to begin. And Mr. Saulsman, here's your first opportunity to speak. And the question is, as was sent to you, what qualifications and experience make you a strong candidate to be a school board member?
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this forum. I think it's really amazing to have this opportunity. I think the things that make me a strong candidate are the fact that I've been a teacher in the state of Washington for the last 29 years. And I spent 17 of those years in the Monroe School District, working both as a classroom teacher and also as a librarian. And I think that's given me a pretty good insight onto what the learning needs of students are. Also in that work, I've worked most of those years on district level technology committees, as well as district level curriculum committees, and have had an opportunity to see how those operate, and also to work with people who have differing views about how we should make decisions regarding those important issues. I have spent 5 years managing a vineyard, so I have some small business experience, that running things, having a budget, that sort of thing, payroll. I'm not sure how valuable that is at all. And finally, I think I'm a very good listener, and I care deeply about our schools and our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reule.
Well, living in this community for over 50 years allows me to bring a unique set of experiences to the school board. All 3 members of my family have attended the Monroe schools. I worked as a certificated teacher in the district for 23 years, teaching 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I worked on many curriculum committees, the trauma-informed learning team, and the building leadership team. I have received training in restorative practices and the PACS good behavior game. I'm a strong candidate because I can see where we have been, facilitate conversations about where we are, and work with others to determine where we are going.
Thank you very much. Ms. Johnson.
I also would like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum for us. It's a great opportunity. I am a mother of 2 kiddos in Monroe School District, and my experience with becoming a mom and being willing to use every resource and opportunity available to me to see my children safe, happy, and healthy will inform my interactions with the students and families of our district. And I acknowledge and honor the fact that families have different areas, different ideas about how and what their children should learn, and I practice unconditional positive regard and focus on solutions. As a professional, I am a vocational rehabilitation counselor, and that demonstrates that I'm committed to helping others realize and accomplish their goals while managing challenges and overcoming obstacles. I'm an effective communicator and listen with the intent to understand and a desire to collaborate and develop solutions that are relevant and impactful. I'll finish there. I see that timer.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Reule, if you would lead off on this next question, please. What are the biggest challenges facing the Monroe School District, and what are its greatest strengths?
One of the biggest challenges facing this school district is communication and a lack of collaboration. COVID has made it extremely important for the district to increase their communication with the community in order to share what's happening in our schools and find out what their concerns are so we can problem solve together. The greatest strength in our schools are the staff working in our schools.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, your thoughts on that question?
Yes, as a parent of students in the district, I would say that currently COVID and our ability to keep children safely in the classrooms is our biggest challenge. I was thrilled when yesterday we received an email from the district that they're going to start offering testing for our students and families. I think we still have a lot of work to do in ensuring that students can remain engaged in school if and when they have to quarantine. We currently don't have a remote learning option, and that's something that we can work on and build out. I would say that our greatest assets are certainly our students, our families, and our educators and staff. We have amazing people in this district, and the more often we work together, the better outcomes we have. Thank you.
And Mr. Saulsman, your thoughts?
I agree with Sarah that I think the COVID has been one of the really largest challenges that we've been facing. Another one that I've seen, especially at school board meetings, is that we have a deeply divided community, and especially the vocal parts have been very loud on either side. And I think that challenge requires that we do some community building and some mending of bridges to bring our community together. If we were thinking about our strengths, I would add also that division has taken the focus away from the things that might be more important, like student safety and health, and also student learning. As far as the opportunities that we have, our greatest strengths, of course, the staff and the support staff and the certificated teachers would be my #1 answer. I also think that we have this amazing opportunity right now. There's been so much upheaval because of all the things in our society in the recent years. This is an opportunity to actually really evaluate what we're doing in schools and make a difference for the benefit of our students.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, you'll have the lead on this next question. How can schools best address the academic and mental health needs arising from the pandemic?
That is a big question and a big task. I am a firm believer in meeting people where they are at and listening to people when they talk to us about what they need and what their goals are. So in addressing students, I think we have an amazing teacher and certificated staff team who is able to listen to our students and guide them through this return to learning. I would also say that when it comes to mental health, there are a lot of resources within the school, but also partnering with our community mental health and physical health partners and facilities is going to be a very important aspect of ensuring that our students and staff and educators have wraparound services to address any needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saulsman, your thoughts on that question?
When we talk about mental health, we have to remember that this addresses also our teacher and staff needs as well. One of the things I observe pretty frequently in my building currently is that our teachers are very stressed. So I think it's very important that we directly teach teachers how to recognize and address through self-care or through other methods, mental health deficiencies that they might find or trauma. And we need to make sure that our schools are not making any more harm, which means we need to make sure that we're doing our diversity, equity, inclusion training so that students aren't being further harmed by ignorant behavior in the schools. As far as academic needs, I think it's really critical now because of this COVID thing that we really focus on effective teaching strategies and we make sure that they're ubiquitous throughout our schools and used consistently, because we know that some strategies work better than others. We can no longer afford to be hit or miss. So we really need to make sure that our teachers and staff are using those strategies that we know are effective to help students learn at the best potential that they have.
Ms. Reule, please weigh in.
Well, I agree with both what Sarah and Brian said, and I will add to it that school staff are adept at assessing academics, and many teachers quickly find out where a student is at and lay out a plan to meet the needs of the student. Differentiating instruction in order to meet the students where they are will be essential. The higher the number of students a staff member works with on a daily basis, the more tools and resources and additional manpower they will need to meet a student's academic and mental health needs.
Thank you so much. Mr. Saulsman, back to you for the lead. How are voters best convinced of the need for passage of bond and levy measures?
It's a great question. And I think that begins with creating a bond between the community and their schools. And one of the things that's troubling as I walk the neighborhoods is that many individuals that I speak with feel like they have no connection to our schools. And that begins by building and maintaining trust, which means clear, effective communication and transparent operations. We need to invite community members to be part of the financial and also the academic decisions that we're making so that they feel like they're being brought along with this. Make sure I get this right. I think the other thing is that we have to really pay attention to what our community members are saying, and we need to make sure that as we make decisions, especially decisions that may be controversial, we have to make sure that the reasons we made those decisions are clear and apparent to our staff so we can increase and maintain that trust. Thank you.
Ms. Reule?
Well, our school district is in a better position financially than some of the surrounding school districts. So we will need to continue to inform our voters about why we need bonds and levies in order to meet the needs of the school district. I hear community members as well saying that they feel they don't have a voice in the district. So we need to increase our communication and transparency with our community in order to share what they think is important, as well as inform our community why we need to pass bonds and levies. That will help us convince voters.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
And I would echo much of what Brian and Mary have said so far. I really think that gaining community buy-in is about ensuring that we have a relationship with our local communities and building that community of trust so that when information comes out, there are opportunities to ask for clarification, to find common ground, and to connect our goals. I think that as a community, understanding our ability to invest in our local infrastructure and in our local schools, our children who are going to grow up and be running those facilities and meeting all of their goals and potentials is something that we can have open conversations about. Thank you.
Ms. Reule, first say on this next one. What is your strategy for working productively with your board colleagues and members of the public whose ideas may be very different from yours?
Well, we need to spend more time listening and understanding different perspectives. Instead of focusing on our differences, we need to focus on putting the kids first. We need to create an atmosphere that invites views and solutions from everyone in the community. Another way to work productively is to increase opportunities for collaboration by planning town hall type meetings. A board that has a problem-solving mindset that works through the tough decisions with community input is very important.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, I also agree about being able to collaborate and find common ground. In my work, I work with people who have been injured on the job, and my focus is always on figuring out what their goals are and understanding them and honoring those goals. So it really isn't about my individual opinion or beliefs, and it is much more about problem solving and figuring out barriers and how to overcome them. I think that asking people for help understanding where they're coming from is one of the best ways that we can open up conversation with each other. Thank you.
Mr. Saulsman, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is find our commonality. And I think we can really focus, or we can agree that probably all directors are going to be focused on student health and academic success. And so that's where we begin. And I agree with the two previous speakers that listening is so critical, because that's where we begin to learn what other common thoughts we might have or ideas we might have. And that's where I think we need to build, is finding the things that we can agree on so that we can then discuss the things we disagree on. Another thing that I think is really important for this process is to demonstrate a commitment to the board process. And by that, I mean that I may fight for what I believe as hard as I'd like, but in the end, if the board makes a different decision, I'm all in on that decision. And when other board directors see that I don't put my opinions above the process of the board, they are more willing to engage in a conversation to get productive decisions made by boards.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, take the lead on this one, if you would, please. How would you balance educational opportunities among schools and among students from different backgrounds? In particular, how might schools begin to address the digital divide?
That is a big question. So I certainly am a believer in equitable opportunities. The way that I have been thinking about that is that I believe we are all created equal. And I think that some of the constructs and circumstances of the world move us away from that equality, and we can use equitable practices to bring us back to equality in an egalitarian world. In terms of the digital divide, that is challenging. It is something that we all experienced and witnessed last year with the shift to remote learning. And it's something that we have heard about in the community as we've been talking to families who had to navigate that. I think our state is increasing resources, and it's important that we work with our city and state government to improve access. Thank you.
Mr. Saulsman.
I agree with Sarah. This is a difficult one. And I think it begins with knowledge. And I think it's really important to survey and understand exactly where all community members are in terms of access, their equitable access. I agree with her that this is really a foundational thing that we must strive for. As part of that, one of the things I think needs to be done by the school districts, they need to do outreach to community members, not just students, but also families, which includes education, so they understand the platforms that are being used by their students and by the district, and also so that we can learn what platforms our community members are using. I think the data shows that people who perhaps are marginalized have had much more impact from COVID, especially with access to digital resources and other resources. And so it's so important that we make sure we understand what our community members need, and we provide it so that all students have access to a quality education.
Thank you. Ms. Reule?
I have also heard from a lot of community members that many students do not have a reliable, or in some cases, even access to the internet. Washington State passed a bill that will bring the internet down all the Washington State highways. Staying on top of the progress of that bill and the funding related to Bill 1365 is important to ensure that all students can connect to the internet. We have community members who cannot use the school-loaned Chromebooks. These reasons include limited access to language translation services, lack of information from the district on how to interact with the online school connections, access to free internet, or not even having a place to charge the computer. I would advocate for all students and parents to have access to the services they need to successfully interact with our schools.
And Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson, please unmute.
I think I responded to that one. If it was about the digital, I think we're on to the next.
So you did. So you did. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so this time, Mr. Saulsman leads off. That's what I've got going on my little cards over here. Okay, this one is a big question. Let's have the timer please up the time limit to 90 seconds on this one. This is not the last question, but it's a big question. And it has to do with bill that was passed by the Senate this year. So the question is going to be, what's your response to this bill? How do you think it'll impact education in Monroe, or should impact education in Monroe? And so here's some background. I bet you all know about it. I want to provide some background for our listeners. This year, the Washington State Legislature passed Senate Bill 5044, which seeks to dismantle institutional racism in the public schools by investing state resources to do two things. The first is to identify model standards for cultural competency. And the second is to provide ongoing training of teachers, aides, administrators, school board members toward the goal of increasing equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, and cultural competency. Again, what is your response to this bill? And Mr. Saulsman, lead on this one, please. 90 seconds on the timer.
All right, let's do this. Well, first of all, I'm a big supporter of this bill, and I think it's really critical and necessary. And I think one of the things I believe very strongly is that this change to provide a more equitable, inclusive school district starts at the very top with the conversations being had by the directors and administrators. I think it's essential that we train everyone in this. We need to look at our hiring and recruiting practices. We need to have staff that reflect our community at large so that students see themselves in staff members as they move their way through the school district. I think it's critical that teachers learn the tools to prevent racist actions in their schools, or to actually respond to them appropriately in a way that prevents students from thinking that they're acceptable or permissible within our schools. I think students need to have an environment where these conversations can be had safely and without causing further harm. And again, that requires this training and this ability. I'm a big fan. And again, I think it's really critical that this lens be applied to our data. So we should be looking at things like our suspension data, our test passing data. We need to look at systemic potential oversights that are creating unfair advantages or disadvantages for members of our school district. I'm a big fan. Thank you.
Ms. Reule?
Well, Bill 5044 provides a good starting point needing to dismantle institutional racism in the public schools. When I look at the racial disparities on the OSPI school report card, it's clear that we have a lot of work ahead of us. As a school board member, I would advocate for more community engagement, particularly from those voices that are not being represented, in order to identify and assess what policies need to be changed so we can work on racially equitable solutions. These issues will require uncomfortable conversations that must be addressed with understanding and respect.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you so much. I also am a big fan of this bill. I think that it gives us the opportunity and holds us accountable to moving forward in this area. I think in particular from Monroe, there is a huge opportunity for us to look at our educators and staff and how they reflect the student population that they serve. We have a Hispanic and Latinx faculty or staff group that is about 4% of that group, and we have a student and families population at about 23%. I think that we can do a better job of recruiting and retaining educators who are able to provide cultural competency and connection with the communities that they serve. I also think that it is important that we look within our district and recognize opportunities where we need some additional guidance and leadership to come in and help us through this path. It is challenging to take on and commit to being anti-racist, and being prepared to ask for help, being prepared to make mistakes and give ourselves grace is important. Thank you.
Okay, back to 60 seconds for a couple of a bit shorter questions, maybe. Ms. Reule, if you'd lead off, please, to tell us what criteria do you think should be applied when determining curriculum content for each grade level and study area?
Well, the Washington State Standards provides the framework to help determine the curriculum content for each grade level and study area. We should also be listening to the community to help determine the specific needs that would be required in order to provide equity to our students. School staff members should also be part of the discussion when deciding on the best curriculum.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Yep, I would echo much of what Mary has said. I believe certainly in adhering to state standards and ensuring that we have the options available to our district ready to be reviewed and discussed as a group. I know that we have a curriculum review committee that involves parents and community members along with our educators and staff, and I think that those are important conversations. And I would really like to highlight how skilled and trained our educators and staff are, and that as a parent, I feel very confident in my children's teachers' ability to recognize good curriculum, to include supplemental information when it's needed, and to guide my children. Thank you.
Mr. Saulsman?
Well, it's hard to go last because I pretty much agree, but I would say, first of all, of course, it must meet state and national standards for teaching. And another big piece, then it needs to have been tried by our teachers, and we need to make sure that there's a foundation of instruction that is going to be successful and work within the constraints of our district. One thing that wasn't mentioned so far that I think is really important is we now really need to evaluate curriculum for cultural responsibility. There are a lot of materials that use public domain materials because they don't have to pay copyright on those, and those are out of date, often written by white males, and provide a pretty narrow view of society. And so as we buy or purchase or lease new curriculum materials, we need to make sure that they reflect a more modern and more inclusive view of society, because I think we want to make sure that we support that with our instruction as well as with our modeling through the trainings that we receive. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, earlier on, we asked a question about what are the strengths and the challenges in the district. Let's talk specifically about funding challenges. What, if any, funding challenges do you see the Monroe School District facing?
So this is one that I feel passionate about. I do believe that our district does a good job of budgeting and of looking at what our resources are. As a vocational rehabilitation counselor, I work with employers to reduce the costs of industrial injury claims. And this is a skill set that I can bring to the director position to help the district understand ways to reduce costs. In particular, we have the Sky Valley Education Center building that has an environmental history of causing some damage. And I think that some of that will probably come to the forefront in the next 4 years when hopefully I am on the board, and that I will be able to share some resources and incentive opportunities that are restorative, that help people who have been harmed to become whole, and that also set our district in the right direction moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Saulsman?
Well, when I think of funding challenges, I agree with Sarah. I think our district is really well run. We have a very strong business and finance office, which I think is really amazing. We're lucky to have that. When I think of challenges, though, I think of two. One we've already discussed, and that was maintaining and increasing public support for bonds and levies. And I think that again goes back to things we've already discussed, which are transparency, communication, and those things. Another area that I think when I think of funding challenges is how are we going to improve our education for our students? We know that the financial environment is not going to change a lot. We're not going to get a huge infusion of money. So it's really critical that we look at our programs and evaluate which ones are working, which ones are not working, which ones are worth improving, and which ones should be removed. And I think that is really kind of what Sarah was mentioning also in saving money. That is the really challenge that I think will make the district great if we can and have the opportunity to do those evaluations.
Thank you. And Ms. Reule?
So I agree with what Sarah and Brian have already discussed. I will add that we have a couple of older properties in the Monroe School District that I'm really concerned about. The Sky Valley is one building that Sarah had mentioned briefly that we have a lot of concerns about and what's going to happen with that building in the future. We have other older buildings in the area, even older than that. On Main Street, there's Frank Wagner, I think it's called Community Center now. And it is an older building that we're very concerned about how we're going to handle that. It's a large property. And the old district office is another piece of property where we have a building that's in disrepair and what is going to happen with that as well. And we have a growing community, so we're going to need to have more room for our schools. That will be a financial challenge.
Thank you. Mr. Saulsman, this is the last of the short questions, and then we'll do that last question that we sent you information about. Aside from what we talked about Senate Bill 5044 that identifies standards and provides training, what are other issues that need to be addressed to try to provide racial equity in Monroe schools?
Well, I still go back to training so that we know that our staff can respond in an appropriate manner when events occur, because I think that's one of the critical things we work on in the district I'm currently in. We believe that is an essential piece of this. And again, the education piece. There's a really cool program in the high school that I would love to see expanded, which is called Bearcat Teach. And that's a program that is involved with getting students to consider the career of education. And it really kind of focuses on students from communities that may not be well represented currently in the teaching profession. I think that's also a great place to begin. I think it's really, really important that this whole idea start at the top and that we begin, again, as directors, as school administrators, as the people leading the district, to make sure that our conversations, our language, our behaviors are not racist, and that we are making sure that we, as much as possible, can remove systemic racism and be anti-racist in our school district.
Ms. Reule.
Well, this is a complex question in my head. I'm thinking that we need to have more training in the school district at all levels, and from the district office all the way down. It impacts every single student in our school district, and the only way that we're going to be able to further racial equity in our schools is to start by having the district management acknowledge that it's a large issue and have more training happen. And I do agree with Sarah that we need to bring in some outside resources in order to make this happen.
And Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, I also would agree that the education component, the creating a district culture that is culturally competent is going to be very important. And I also, would really like to focus on celebrating. I think that we have so much diversity in our community, and often I think that goes unrecognized or uncelebrated. It's something that we don't talk about enough, and we have so much to learn from each other and so much to share. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for our students and their families to connect further with the district. Creating this celebration, this excitement about learning from each other will then lead to important conversations and access so that everybody can be at the decision-making table and we can move forward together as a community that supports each other.
Thank you so much. Ms. Reule, you have the pleasure of going first on the last question. And for this one, you have a little bit longer, 90 seconds, to let us know what additional issues or information you would like to bring to the attention of the community.
Well, the school district has some policies already in place to deal with bullying, such as the Safe School Alert System. It allows people to report, and then the district follows up on the report. I would encourage the district to spend more time on preventing and stopping bullying by training all students and staff in bystander intervention, focusing on a positive school climate, and increasing social and emotional learning. We talked about several of the things that I already thought I could add to the list, but I do agree that we need to work on diversifying our staff to meet the needs of in ratio to the students population that we have. And I wanted to take a moment to thank the League of Women Voters for giving me the opportunity to answer these questions. So thank you.
You are more than welcome. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you so much. So I will talk just a little bit about more about why I'm running. I really am interested in increasing access and opportunities to engage with the school board in meaningful ways and making sure that the gatekeepers actually open gates rather than just standing guard at them. Honoring and amplifying diverse voices with an anti-racist and inclusive lens so our district serves all people equitably, and all of us making a commitment to serve students while identifying individual barriers and collaborating to develop solutions with a focus on student goals. One other area that I think is really important or instance is the Monroe Inclusion Collective. It was a group of students who put together a study. They reached out to their fellow students. They gathered information about the experiences that people were having with racism, with comments and experiences against the LGBTQIA community. And they presented their findings to the district. And they also gave 5 different actions that they were asking for. And I believe we can do a better job of responding to that group, of continuing their work throughout the district and making change, because they told us what they need. And I agree, we need to make those changes. Thank you.
And Mr. Saulsman, you have the last word.
Well, I too would like to once again thank you for this opportunity. And I would like to thank the 2 people I'm here with, because I'm extremely excited to hear their views and I am impressed with what they have to say. I agree with what they said. One of the things that I think is a focus of mine is community support for our schools. I really envision a Monroe where everyone is proud of our schools and the students that go there. And one of the things that has troubled me in my conversations with community members is how many people have no idea what occurs in our schools. I've been told things that teachers do or don't do, and I've been in school for 30 years and I've never observed the things that have been described to me. So I think it's really critical that we improve our communication, that we focus on getting accurate, useful, and transparent view of what's going on in schools, so that our community members can see what they're getting for their money and also start to see that it has a purpose beyond whether they have children in the district or not. I think the vision of opening our school board to the community is really important. Again, I've heard parents who feel like they're shut out or don't have the opportunity to voice their concerns. We need to make sure everybody feels seen and heard, and that we can support our community to be proud of the Monroe schools, because I think there's a lot to be proud of and there's work to do, but I think we have people that can do that. Thank you once again.
Well, it's been our great pleasure to facilitate this forum, and we're very appreciative of each of you candidates for joining us and for running for office. A recording of this forum and our others will be available on the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County website and our YouTube channel. You can find links to those recordings at our website, LWVSnoho, that's LWVSNOHO.org. We encourage each of you listeners to explore additional information about these and all candidates. The Snohomish County voter pamphlet will be mailed to residences starting October 13th. Vote411.org, sponsored by the League of Women Voters, is another good source for nonpartisan voting information. Finally, general election ballots will be mailed on October 14th. Election Day is November 2nd. Please vote. This concludes our candidate forum. Thank you all for joining us.